Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiro Vanachari Yamuna Tiro Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Mansa Paribhai Radha Sukha Small
Jai
Sri Radha Krishna Bhogavna Sam Kund Radha Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navadvip Dham ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Guru Dwarka Dham ki jai, Swami Bhaktivinoda ki jai, all glories to that. All glories to that. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, everybody. It's 5:04.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I think we
Hare
can get
Krishna.
started. Hare Krishna. So we'll get started. We are currently in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Last time, I believe I completed through text 45. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we completed through text 45. So before we begin, I'll do a quick review of what we have discussed so far, just so that we are meeting after 1 week, and then especially coming out of holidays, though we already had 1 or 2 sessions after the holidays. Just kind of a quick revision so that we don't lose the flow or the overall context of the conversation, because when we start going into the details of the purport, sometimes we might lose the overall context. So before chapter 2, again, the chapter 1, as we know, just before the beginning of the war between the Kurus and the Pandavas, Arjuna asks Krishna to take the chariot between the two armies, and then after looking at some familiar faces, on the opposite side, Arjuna was overwhelmed, and then he decided he didn't want to fight. The three primary reasons that he gave. Does anyone recall what are the three primary reasons why Arjuna did not want to fight? Maybe some of you can give one reason, whatever you can recall. Anyone?
He was lamenting, Prabhuji.
Yes, what was his specific lamentation?
That he will be left to enjoy the fruits of enjoy the kingdom without his near and dear ones.
Yes, good, very good. So that was the first one reason. One of the three primary reason was that, well, hey Krishna, even if I win, what's the point? Because generally when you want to celebrate your successes and victories with your friends and family members, but in this fratricidal war, everyone would be killed, and so even if I win, what's the point, right? That's Arjuna's thinking. What was the second reason? Someone else might like to answer that. The second reason why
he would be creating a big scene by killing all his gurus and his forefathers.
he would be doing what?
He will be in the war. He will do a big scene if he kills his family members, his gurus, and his forefathers and his relatives.
Yeah, so the second reason, again, specifically, he mentions that, well, your teachers, and specifically Dronacharya, who taught him the military science, and then his grandfather, Bhishma, again, both of them were very righteous and, elderly and respectable. And so, one would not even dare to speak against them, what to, talk about like fighting against them and then killing them, right? So that was his another big concern, like why he didn't want to fight. And what was the third reason? What was the third reason why Arjuna did?
Varna Shankara.
Yes, good, very good point. So the war comes at a very huge social cost, which is generally understood is that when all the soldiers are killed, which are primarily men, the women and children, they are left unprotected, and what often happens is that the winning party comes, and when it takes over the kingdom, a lot of women are exploited, there are unwanted progeny, and because these children are not begotten in a wedded family, the proper samskaras of family traditions, culture, and specifically the training within one's varna, right? Generally in Vedic culture, the marriage happens within the same varna, and so what happens is if both the father and the mother are Brahmana, or both of them are Kshatriya, there is strong influence of that culture on the child, in the upbringing of the child, and then the child is brought up in that culture. But when there is a marriage outside of varna, then maybe one has more Brahmana like, another Kshatriya like, then there is a mixed impressions on the child, and so that purity of the varnas is lost, and that is still within the marriage, but just that the marriage is not in the same varna. What to speak about when women are exploited outside of the varnas? Then there is no question of the varnas are even more messed up, right? And so varna sankara literally means linking or mixing up of the varnas, and that actually destroys the varnashram system, which is the founder of the Aryan civilization. And when we say Aryan civilization, we're not referring to the Aryan race. It's not, specifically in the Western world, when you talk about Aryans, they have this idea of the white supremacist kind of conception of what the Aryan race and what the Aryans are about. But as Srimad Bhagavatam explains, Aryans have nothing to do with the race. It's about, Aryan literally means a progressive culture where the progress is specifically towards spiritual realization, and the spiritual realization cannot happen without the strong moral foundation and a strong social foundation. The Varnashram system is essentially provides that, and so the purity of maintaining the Varnas, which is not purity of the race, but the culture that propagates from one generation to another. Okay. So having said that, when we go into the second chapter, Krishna mentions, that's where Krishna first starts speaking, right? And then he brings up he starts countering Arjuna's argument. First thing he says that, hey, you seem to be speaking very intelligently, but in reality you are a fool. That's what Krishna tells Arjuna. And then he presents a series of arguments. And first of all, he says, well, you should not lament. You're worried about your grandfather and your teacher, but in essence, they are spirit souls and not the body. And so in the course of your execution of your duty as a Kshatriya, if their bodies are killed, it's actually their bodies, they are not themselves killed. It says there was never a time when you did not exist, when I did not exist, nor these kings did not exist. And then it begins a series of verses which describes the nature of the soul. The soul is eternal, immovable, is never born, never dies, is not affected by fire. It cannot be dried by wind. It cannot be wet by water, right? So it cannot be cut into pieces. And so it describes the nature of the soul in a series of verses. After that, the next theme of his arguments is that, which is, you can say, worldly considerations, where he's saying that, for a warrior or a Kshatriya, respectable Kshatriya, infamy is worse than death. And then, if you quit and you give up your duties, no one is going to say, Arjuna, that, oh, he left the war because he was compassionate towards his grandfather, his teacher, his relatives, and no one is going to appreciate him because of his high ideals he has left. He would just say that Arjuna is a coward, right? He was afraid of fighting, or he derelicted his duties. And then finally, the third theme of Krishna's argument, which is where we are right now, is where Krishna is explaining not just duties. He's saying, okay, it's Kshatriya dharma, you have to fight, but most of the prescribed duties according to Vedas, right, which is where the verse 45 is the essence of that argument, is that the prescribed duties in the Vedas, they are written in a way to provide people who want material comforts and are expecting something in return. So there are some allurements which are provided in the Vedas, but that's not the ultimate objective of the Vedas. The ultimate objective of the Vedas is that they want the living beings to take up a spiritual path. But initially, no one is interested, right? Without any context. Even when someone takes up spirituality, they want to see, well, how I can be happy. That's how the process begins. So the Vedas provide, they know that, well, the conditioned living souls, they want material enjoyment. So then they, say, okay, instead of they pursuing materialistic enjoyment in an atheistic way, let's provide a dharmic or a religious platform, and within that, within that boundaries, or they can pursue some sense enjoyment in a regulated way. And when they are frustrated, which does happen eventually in the due course of time, when that's the nature of the material world, right? Because we are spirit souls, the material enjoyment cannot give us satisfaction. So in due course of time, when one is frustrated and the soul starts thinking, well, there must be something higher than this, right? And so because they are already on the dharmic platform, then they are more willing to tune into what the Vedas really intend to provide, which is the spiritual realization. So that's why dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Dharma is basically moral platform. Within that moral platform, on that foundation, one can pursue artha, which is economic development. And using artha, one can try to pursue sense enjoyment, which is kama. And then one is frustrated by kama, and then one can seek liberation, which is moksha. So that's how it is structured. So let's continue on with verse number 46. Unless somebody has to make a question or comment before we start today's class. Okay. Verse number 46. Yavan artha udapane sarvatah sampluto dake tavan sarvesu vedesu Brahmanasya vijanatah. Translation: all purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. Similarly, all purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. So it's very deep import over here, right? Just like um, we locally in villages, right? If you want water, well, there might be a river or there might be a pond, but sometimes there might not be a river, right? Not all villages have access to rivers or lakes, and then they dig well, and the well basically tap into the aquifers, right? The underground water. Um, but ultimately, the water is percolating in the ground from reservoirs. These aquifers, they are connected to bigger lakes, right? And the lakes are flooded by rivers. So ultimately, the whatever purpose a small well serves, right, it at once can be served by a greater reservoir, right? The well can only provide water, which we can use for potable water, maybe for cooking, bathing. But when you go to the river, it not only provides water for the same purposes, but the rivers bring alluvial minerals in the soil. And when the rivers get flooded, those minerals, generally flooding is not appreciated. We say, oh, flooding is not good, but that's nature's arrangement. Whenever flooding happens, what happens is the water actually goes in the plains, in the fields, and along with it brings all the silt in the alluvial soil and the minerals, and so the land naturally becomes fertile, and you don't need any fertilizers. So that's just nature's way of making those lands irrigable without using artificial chemical based fertilizers, which in the previous times you didn't have any. So you see that river is serving much more bigger purposes, right? Where it's not only providing water for the daily use, but then it's providing irrigation, and there so many other things. Like the fishermen, they would get fishes from, they would go to the river for fishing as well. I mean, you cannot fish much in the well. So the analogy is that in that similar way, the Vedas can be similarly all purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them, right? If one does not know the purpose, then what happens is that they would just very limited understanding. Oh, Vedas, they prescribe different karma kanda activities so that I can get wealth, prestige, or whatever I am seeking in this life, and then elevation to the heavenly planets in the next life. So that's a very limited thinking, but that's not the ultimate purpose of the Vedas, right? But one who really knows the purpose behind, the ultimate purpose of the Vedas is what? Vedescha sarver aham eva vedya. The purpose of all Vedas is ultimately to know me, Krishna is saying, right? But Vedesu durlabham, adurlabham atma bhakto. But Krishna is though the purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna, right? It's not easily accessible, right? It's durlabham, right? Because Vedas, there are so many other divisions of the Vedas, and one can be easily lost. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that the rituals and sacrifices mentioned in the Karma Kanda division of the Vedic literature are meant to encourage gradual development of the self-realization. So this is what I discussed earlier, right? Then anyway, people are interested in sense enjoyment. Well, if the Vedas provide them that venue, then there is some connection, you're bridging, right? Otherwise, there's no common ground to communicate with people. And they provide that moral basis to pursue sense enjoyment, and once they are frustrated, they can seek higher realization. So that's why it's called gradual development of self-realization, right? So we have to talk to people in the language that they understand, right, at the level that they are. Otherwise, there's no tuning of frequency, and there cannot be any communication. There has to be a common platform in order to any kind of communication, not just communicating a spiritual message. Even in our daily life, they just like there are professional negotiators, right, especially in hostage situations, right, and where there's a question of life and death, and so somebody's kidnapped or or held hostage, and the negotiators, the the armed forces are there, but they are not trained as a negotiator. They bring in a negotiator, and this negotiator really knows. He tries to tap into the psyche of the person who is holding people at hostage, and then he tries to find a common ground to begin the conversation, and that means there is some empathy that is shown, so that the person can relate to the negotiator and is willing to talk. So yeah, that's the fundamental basis, right, for any kind of communication. So, okay. So moving on, all the purpose of self-realization is clearly stated in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The purpose of studying the Vedas is to know the Lord. So that's the verse I quoted. Vedescha sarver ahameva vedya, the primeval cause of everything. So self-realization means understanding Krishna and one's eternal relationship with him. The relationship of the living entities with Krishna is also mentioned in the 15th chapter. Living entities are parts and parcels of Krishna, and therefore revival of Krishna consciousness by the individual living entity is the highest perfectional stage of Vedic knowledge. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. O my Lord, a person who is chanting your holy name, although born of a low family, that of a Chandala or a dog eater, is situated on the highest platform of self-realization. Such a person must have performed all kinds of penances and sacrifices according to Vedic rituals, and studied the Vedic literatures many times. After taking bath in all the holy places of pilgrimage, such a person is considered to be the best of the Aryan family. So again, in the Varnashram system, there are different classes. From a spiritual perspective, actually, there's no difference between all the classes, especially when you talk about Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. They are spiritually all equal. But because of limited understanding of the people, they try to make a distinction between higher and lower grades, but ultimately they are all on the same level, because the ultimate objective is to get beyond these social divisions. Of course, one cannot artificially get over it, because the Varnas, they provide the strong social and moral foundation on which one can practice spirituality. And when one is completely purified and in a pure spiritual platform, then the obligation of the Varnas can be overlooked or can be given up. But otherwise, one has to follow, right? But anyway, the point here is that even if somebody is not within the Varnashram system, a Chandala is not part of the four Varnas, is someone who is an outcast. And because that person is not being trained in the samskaras or the sacred impressions of the Varna, which can help elevate socially and morally to perform spiritual activities. But even if somebody is coming from such a background, one can be purified by taking up devotional service to Krishna and by chanting the holy names of Krishna. And one should understand that such a person has actually achieved the equivalent of performing all the sacrifices of the Vedic rituals. Because what is the ultimate purpose of all the sacrifices of the Vedic rituals? Ultimately, initially they might perform sacrifice for sense enjoyment, but when they have proper knowledge, which we'll discuss in verse chapter 3, the proper knowledge is that, well, the sacrifices are not for our enjoyment, it's not in anticipation of that, but it's for satisfaction of Vishnu. And one who is performing devotional service and chanting the holy names of the Lord, he has already come to that conclusion, right? Which is the end objective. There is no gradual, as mentioned earlier in this purport, that the Vedas, they bring the spiritual upliftment in a very gradual way. So the ultimate objective is coming to devotional service to Krishna. And to that effect, during one's life, one might go to many holy places and study Vedic scriptures. But what is the purpose of Vedic scriptures? Again, coming to that final conclusion that Narayana Parasarve, right? Narayana is the ultimate objective. Okay. So one must be intelligent enough to understand the purpose of the Vedas without being attached to the rituals. One should not be misdirected, right? Earlier, Krishna says, right? Earlier, a couple of verses ago, he mentioned that those who are attached to the flowery language of the Vedas, for such people, the resolute the resolute will to surrender to Krishna and to take up devotional service, that does not develop, right? And why? Because they don't understand the purpose of the Vedas, and they are attached to various rituals for material benefit. So it is not possible for common men in this age, in Kali Yuga specifically anyway, to perform all these elaborate Vedic rituals. Neither are people capable of studying the intricacies of Vedanta and Upanishads. So Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all the Upanishads, and Upanishads are the essence of the Vedas. And that's why Gita is also known as Gita Upanishad. So the cream, the crux of the entire Vedic knowledge is presented over here in Bhagavad Gita. It requires a lot of time, energy. First of all, one has to learn Sanskrit, which is very complex, very refined language, no doubt, but also takes a lot of time to master it. And just by knowing the language, it's not that one can interpret, because one has to be trained in parampara to have that mental framework, so that one can understand in the proper mood, and then mood cannot be acquired unless it's transmitted through parampara. So anyway, this is not possible in this age, and so the purpose of the Vedic culture is served by chanting the holy names of the Lord, which is what Lord Chaitanya recommended to deliver all the fallen souls. So there is a particular pastime where Lord Chaitanya, he is himself a great Vedic scholar, but in a discussion with an impersonalist, a Mayavadi, Prakasanand Saraswati, who was a sannyasi, he criticized what kind of sannyasi you are. That is Prakasanand Saraswati told to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because sannyasi, they are supposed to study Vedanta, and when they say study Vedanta, they are referring to the impersonal understanding of the Vedanta philosophy, which is what Sankaracharya, he wrote the Kevala Advaitavad philosophy, right, which is full of impersonalism, because the Vedanta is written in a very indirect and cryptic way, so it could be easily subject to interpretation. So at the time especially, and even in the present times, the Vedanta philosophy is mostly, people understand it from an impersonal perspective. Of course, all the Vaishnava acharyas who came, beginning with Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Nimbarkacharya, they presented the devotional understanding of the Vedanta philosophy, and the personal devotional understanding of the Vedanta philosophy. So anyway, Prakasanand Saraswati criticizes the Lord. You are chanting holy name of the Lord, just like a sentimental person. Sannyasi is supposed to devote time in study of all these Vedic literatures. And so, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, and he is learned in all scriptures. Also, in his manifest pastimes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he did study various scriptures. But in order to make a point, Lord Chaitanya accepts a humble position. He says, "My spiritual master told me that I am simply a fool, and I cannot understand all this complex philosophy. So he just asked me to chant the holy names of the Lord." So in this way, it's not possible for everyone to be so philosophically adept, and that doesn't mean we should not try to understand philosophy. Otherwise, we would not have this class over here. What it means is that we don't have to go into the intricacies of the Vedic scriptures, but the essence of the Vedic scripture is provided by Srila Prabhupada and other Vaishnava acharyas in commentaries, which people of this age can easily understand, and that trouble we should take. Srila Prabhupada used to be awake all night translating and writing purports. If that was not important, then he would have never written this book. So we might not study the Vedanta philosophy and other Vedic literatures, but definitely the books of Vaishnava acharyas and their commentaries, which are written for this age, which does encompass the essence of all Vedic literature, that we should definitely study. So the best purpose of Vedanta philosophy is served by inoffensively chanting. And when one understands the conclusion of all the essence which is provided in Bhagavad Gita, and one takes to chanting of the holy names of the Lord. And the other way to look at it is that unless one has that philosophical, at least some basic philosophical understanding, which is what we are covering in Bhagavad Gita, one might not be even inspired to take up the chanting of holy name, or they might just think this is something sentimental. Just as Prakasanand Saraswati, he when he saw that Lord Chaitanya is chanting, he thought that he is just chanting sentimentally. But devotees are not sentimental. They, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is well versed in the scriptures. Though out of humility, he said that he does not understand and he's not capable. But we all know that he had already studied the philosophy in much more detail. And of course, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's the knower, the compiler of all the Vedas, right? What is it? Vedanta Krit Vedavit Cha. Later in Bhagavad Gita says Vedanta Krit. It tells to Arjuna, I am the compiler of the Vedas. Of course, Vyasadeva wrote it, but Vyasadeva is a literary incarnation of Krishna. Vedanta Krit Vedavit Evacha, and I am the knower of the Vedas. Right? So this is the proper understanding of this, the sum and substance of this purport. Anyone has any questions or comment on this particular verse? No? Moving on. Verse number 47. Okay, this is probably one of the few verses that very popular in India, though hardly anyone really understands the import of it. Often misquoted, misinterpreted, and used to justify one's own misunderstandings. So we'll discuss this definitely. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phalesu kadachana ma karma phal heturbhur ma te sangostva akarmani. Translation: you have right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. So, as I say, many of you would already be familiar with this verse. You would have at least heard people quoting this verse. I don't know if you want to share any experiences where, or the common understanding of this verse that a layman has, and how it is, quoted to justify certain kind of actions. And I don't know if anyone want to share their experiences or of what they might have come across in the past, of what kind of common arguments or understanding people provide of this verse. Anyone? Yeah,
mostly it's like you just do your thing, and I mean, you're supposed to believe that leave the rest to God.
Right.
Most of the time, that's how we have heard about this verse.
Right. Yeah, that's one particular version where people say, see, karma karo, you just do your work. And then their understanding of work is, well, anything, you might be doing. There's no distinction between karma, vikarma, what is allowed, what is prescribed, what is proscribed. There's no distinction. He says, whatever situation, whatever you're doing, could be anything nonsense. You just keep doing. And then the work is worship. That's, I don't know, you don't hear so much in the West, but in India, you would see that. So when work is worship, it seems to be some sort of maybe inspired from this particular verse. I'm guessing over here, but those kind of ideas persist. The other, so one is that the verse is quoted in this way. You just keep doing your prescribed. You don't say prescribed duty. You say it's just karma karo. You just have to do your work, and that's it. Everything else, everything goes. Everything is justified. Any kind of action is justified on the basis of this verse, which is obviously not correct. The other thing that often comes up is, or they question, they challenge. He says, well, this makes no sense. He says, any kind of work we have to do, it has to be materially motivated. And if there is no motivation, and if you say, yeah, no, you are not entitled to fruits of action, then why should I work, right? So this is actually an intelligent question, but the question again comes because the essence is not understood, and it's not easy to understand. So there's no, I can relate to people why they would ask this question. It takes because it's not taught systematically, and unless one has, one is systematically trained, they would not know this. And so this is that's a valid question if anyone asks that, how is it that Krishna is saying that, hey, do your duty, but one should not be motivated by fruits of action. So I have addressed this particular point, I believe, a couple of times in the past, but I'll describe this briefly. Is that, initially everyone is motivated by material enjoyment, and there's no doubt about it. And so it's not that one comes directly to this point where one is doing prescribed duty without without expecting anything in return. But there is a process by which one will come to a stage where one is not motivated by those fruits of actions. Initially, one is motivated, and what happens is that in due course of time, because of the law of diminishing returns, the gratification that one gets from the fruits of action, that gratification diminishes or reduces over a period of time. And so unless one is provided an ever increasing remuneration, the motivation is not sustained, right? And that's why in the especially in the contemporary world, you provide different kind of benefits or increase in salary every year, or promotion or prestige, and that's how people are motivated. Suppose my salary stops tomorrow, I'm not going to continue to do my work, right? So the material motivation is the constant impetus. But what happens in varnashram is that the prescribed duties, when it says prescribed duties, so the karma is, Prabhupada is making that distinction which people don't understand here. Karma refers to prescribed duties according to one's varna. And according to one's varna, whether it's a brahmana, kshatriya, vaishya, or a sudra, the work that is born out of nature is a work that one is impelled to do, whether that person likes it or does not like, right? Sometimes say there is a mess in the room, the room is not clean, and then you might be very tired late in the night, you might hate cleaning it, but one who has a brahmana like mentality, or even other varnas, it's not just brahmanas who do cleanliness in the Vedic culture, right? The cleanliness is very important for all varnas, but specifically brahmanas, it is mentioned as because they are engaged in sacrifices and in the worship of the deities and things like that. That even if I hate doing it, I'm impelled to do work, right? And so I think a couple of weeks ago I had shared an article in the group. This was from Harvard Business Review, and the author nicely describes, it's not exactly the varna specific duties, but I think it kind of touches the concept where he says that generally the advice for career that it's given to people is that follow your passion. And he says that's completely wrong. Instead, one should follow one's blisters. What it means by is that the point is one should take up a path, whether even it mentions specifically, one might not be even good at doing it. That Harvard HBR says, or they might not be good at doing the task yet, or they might not be doing that task period. And so remuneration should not be the one that how one should select a career. Money will come in due course of time, but the thing is, if one is impelled to work, whether one likes it or not, whether one is skillful in doing that or not, then it is sustainable, in the sense that when one is trained in that fashion, one would initially, when he takes the first job or an assignment, the motivation might be there that, okay, I want some material benefit. But because of law of diminishing returns, when the one stops getting the same amount of satisfaction, one would continue to work. Why? Because now one is impelled by the nature, right? Whether one likes it or not, or so one does not need an ever increasing stimulation, and so that's why varnashram system is not prone to collapse. And so for millions of years, the Vedic society was intact. No foreign invaders could come and capture the land, right? And so India was respected all over the world for millennia altogether. People used to come to enrich knowledge of different kind of sciences, even from surgery to astronomy to health sciences. The Greeks, right? And there's so many other cultures. They came, they were inspired, and tremendous wealth, rich in all respects. Only when the varnashram system was broken, it was overtaken by so many, not just the invaders, but everything diminished. So the system is, first of all, is not prone to collapse. It's much more sustainable. And then what happens is, when one is fixed in that prescribed duties, and is not motivated by the fruits of actions, and then that work is eligible to be offered as a sacrifice, right? So now he says, okay, I have to work anyways, right? And I'm not so much motivated by remuneration, but this is something I am impelled to do. And then this work is pure enough to be offered as a sacrifice. Just like when we offer bhoga to Krishna, we don't offer something that is stale or what is already eaten. That's not worthy. It is to be offered as a bhoga to Krishna, right? It is amedhya, something that is not pure enough. Now, when it comes to work, if you use the same analogy, if work has to offer to be Krishna, then work also has to be pure. So how can the work be pure, right? So later, I think in 18th chapter, one of the later chapters, it's the three factors of the work is described, which is karana, karma, and karta. So karma means prescribed duty. Well, first of all, the work should be moral, or should be according to the prescription of the Vedas related to one's varna. So that is the first part, right? So the karma has to be pure. The second is karta. The doer himself has to be pure. How can the doer be pure? Well, if the doer is trained in the samskaras of one's varna, right, then one is properly situated. That's why that varnashram is important. And then karana. Karana means instrument. For any kind of work you perform, instruments are needed. Instruments could be, literally means the senses, because senses are instruments, and there could be extended senses, which are other tools or equipments that one might use. So specifically talking about senses, the senses has to be pure, right? And how can one be pure? How can the senses be pure? Well, it means that senses are not filled with lust. And later Arjuna asks Krishna that, even if one knows what is right and wrong, what are the prescribed duties, why is it that one is impelled to act against one's nature and perform sin? So Krishna says it is lust only, which resides in senses and mind. And what it means is that, see, the desire for the fruits of action, right, that is lust. That's what it means, right? One is impelled by lust. And so that lust, when overcomes one, and the senses are also affected by it, and senses are not pure. So in due course of time, the senses are purified. When one is trained in the varnas, their varna, samskara, not sankara, varna samskaras, the impressions are purified, and the work is purified. And in that case, that work is eligible to be offered as a sacrifice to the Lord, right? That is a pure standard, right? I mean, we might not be able to follow that pure standard right now, but that's the ultimate goal, right? Even in the Vedic culture, not from the get-go one is situated on the pure platform, but that's the goal. That's the work that is ideally eligible. Now you can offer it as a sacrifice. Now the fruits can be offered as a sacrifice to Krishna, and then that becomes prasadam. And then we'll look into detail what are the all different kind of sacrifices. And so in that situation, one is impelled because by the nature, and not impelled by different kind of material motivation. So that can be achieved in due course of time. It doesn't require any, special endeavor. It just happens if one is trained properly according to one's varna. because the law of diminishing results, it acts, right? The motivation will go away. Anything, if you like, just like a small child, you bring a toy, and first 2-3 days the child will be super excited and will enjoy, and then the child gets bored, and then the toy is just lying in one corner, right? So that's the nature of the material world. And the other example I've given so many times: you're hungry, you get so much satisfaction from the first morsel of food. In every successive morsel of the food, what happens is that you don't get the same level of satisfaction. By the time one finishes one's meal, one might not even have any room to take another morsel, right? So in the beginning, when one was really hungry, that one morsel of food appeared so much appealing, it does not appeal anymore. And so that just happens in due course of time. And so when is engaged according to one's nature, then that is possible. So one might question, well, how is it possible in Kali Yuga to do all that? Well, many people are are in professions which match their nature. And given this example a couple of times, that there was this incident of a security officer at Best Buy. I'm sorry, I probably quoted it so many times, but I'm sure there are many other examples, but this is one I am able to recall easily. He was fired because he tried to help the police arrest a criminal who was on the parking lot. He was trying to run away. But the CEO of Best Buy was not happy. He said, well, this is not our business. That criminal was not trying to steal anything from Best Buy, or was not creating any troubles within the premise. And so the security guard unnecessarily put his life at risk, and he risked the branding of the company or whatever. And so he was fired. And the media came to take his interview. He said, well, this was the right thing to do, and so I did it. And if this happens again, I'll do it again. And it doesn't matter that I was fired, or I might get fired again. So you see, he's not motivated by any kind of remuneration. So that is a real Kshatriya. There are other instances where there are cops which have failed in performing their duties. I think one example was a couple of years ago, where in Parkland, Florida, I think it's Miami metropolitan area, there was this shootout in a high school, or was it a middle school? Oakland Park, I believe. And then there was this cop who was right there. And then when he heard the shots fired, instead of rushing in order to save the lives, he actually took cover. And he was afraid of his own life, right? So you see, he has taken up that task, but then that's not his nature. So one of the qualities of Kshatriya is not afraid of death. So anyway, when one is engaged according to the nature, then in due course of time, by the arrangement of the varnashram system, one's senses are purified, and one is not motivated by the fruits of action. The second part is, Krishna says, do not consider yourself as a cause of the results of your activities. So that also is very confusing, could appear confusing to people. What do you mean, I'm not the cause of my activities? And never be attached to not doing anything. So again, the detailed answer to this is also available in the later chapters. So as I described the the three aspects of karma, right, which is karana, karma, karteti, trivida karma, sangraha. The three factors, or the three components which comprise the work, I mentioned that, which is the prescribed duties, the doer, and the senses. Similarly, there are 5 factors which affect the success or the outcome of any work, right? That is also described later, which is azisthanam tatha karta, karanam cha prithak vida, vividascha prithak cheshta, devam chaivatra panchamam. So the 5 factors which affect the success. We think I am the doer, I am the ultimate cause of the outcome. Well, I am one of the causes, but there are so many other causes. So that's why Krishna is saying that don't consider yourself as the only cause. That's what it literally means. So what are the other causes? Well, first is adhisthanam. Sthanam means place. Adhisthanam is place and circumstances. That is the first factor. Just like we ask you to, hey, go to Arizona in the middle of July and try to grow, I don't know, some soya beans or do some agriculture. That's not a good place. Neither time is favorable. Or go to Antarctica and do it. Well, again, that's not a good place. Well, why is there a lot of farming in the Midwest? Right? The place matters. Situation matters. Sometimes we have to wait for the right time and right circumstances to do things. So this Adhisthanam is a big factor. Adhisthanam tatha karta, which is a doer. So yes, a doer is another factor. Karanam cha prithak vida. So karanam means senses. We already talked about that. Suppose one is handicapped, one cannot see, one cannot hear, or is an amputee, or the arm missing, then one is already disadvantaged in one way. So that is senses, but then there are extended senses. There are instruments. If people who have access to better tools, better equipments, right, they can do things more efficiently. So that is another factor that could affect the outcome of your work. Karanam cha prithak, vividascha prithak chesta. Then the fourth factor is the frequency and the quality of one's endeavors. And that's why they say failures are the stepping stones to success, if one actually learns from one's mistakes. So sometimes we might have to try the same thing so many times, especially anything that has to do with skills or arts. If one is learning a musical instrument, or if one is learning how to use a weapon, right? It requires so much practice. There are even, say this, different, if you look at different NBA players, they would, are known for, breaking so many records. But if you look at their history or interview, they would say they keep track of their failures. He said, there are so many times my team counted on me, I failed, right? Or, there were so many easy shots I was not able to deliver, right? And so multiple endeavors, one has to keep trying. So quality and the frequency of the endeavors. And Devam Chaivatra Panchamam, the fifth factor is Devam, which Srila Prabhupada translates as a super soul, but Devam literally means time. Time is an important element, right? It's like recently, was it last year or the year ago, actually, not last year, just it's over now, 2021. There was this person from Portland. He was the first person to, crisscross across Antarctica alone without any support. He had his own supplies which would last for 3-4 weeks, how much time it took to, and then he had this sledge, he would pull it, and then he crisscrossed across entire single-handedly, right? No team, without any dogs or other animals to pull the sledge. And what time did he choose? Well, he chose the Arctic summer, right, for the South Pole, which is day all time. The temperatures are still very cold, but it's probably the warmest that you would find in Antarctica. And then there's daylight, right? I mean, what if you'd, that's the best time to do it, right? He couldn't have, his chances would have reduced significantly if probably would not even have survived if he chose the Arctic night for the South Pole. Similarly, there is a time of the year when all these mountaineers, they go to Mount Everest. Well, there's the best time of the year to climb the Mount Everest. So things like that. So time is an important factor. In the Vedic culture, they look at muhurat, or a time which is auspicious for that particular kind of activity. Could be a marriage, or not just marriage, but even going on a war, building a new palace. Right, so he says Mars represents aggression and war-like situation. So if somebody if a king is planning to attack an enemy, then they would call an astrologer and he says what is a favorable time. And then the astrologer will look at particular position of Mars and how it is affecting favorably or not, right? And then they would choose, okay, this is a favorable time, and they would choose that time to launch an attack. So there are so many subtle considerations in terms of time. So time is an important factor. So you see, I myself is only one factor. Now there are 4 other factors beyond me which affect the success. So Krishna is anyway saying, never consider yourself the cause or the result of your activities. And then never be attached to not doing your duty. So don't become lazy. Attached to not doing duty basically means that, hey, not there are 2 reasons why one should always do one duty, because anyway by one's nature one is impelled to act. Well, if you don't act, then what we will do, right? I mean, there has to be some work. Now, one who are completely spiritually liberated, for them the question of working does not arise. But Krishna later will clarify that, hey, I don't have any cause for working. I'm the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I don't have anything to achieve, not I'm trying to aspire to achieve anything. Everything that exists actually all belongs to me, right? But still I work according to the prescribed duties, because what if I stop working? Common men follow those who are leaders, and the leaders have to set a good example, right? Even if they are not obliged to do something, just to set a good example, they should do what is appropriate. So that, because common men would follow whatever the leaders do, right? Recently we had the leader of the country, he set not such a good example, and that incited the masses to bring out the worst of it, right? And though these propensities might exist, the leaders makes the difference. Leaders, just by their words and actions, they can change how the common men or the laymen would behave. So when Krishna is saying never be attached to not doing duty, is in the conditioned state of life, especially when one has not achieved spiritual perfection, working according to one's nature and continuing to do the duty is extremely important, right? Because that will gradually purify one and elevate one and help one be situated on that platform by which eventually one will not be motivated by other success or failure. Just like Arjuna, what he's saying, why is attached to not doing his duty, right? Because he is material consideration. He is looking the fruits of action. Will I win? Then also I cannot enjoy. So I should not fight. See, his action is, what is his criteria? His criteria is materially motivated. So Krishna is specifically telling him, to Arjuna, hey, your consideration is in material, and says you're attached to not doing your duty because you are again thinking, if it is going to help me, I will do it. If it's not favorable, I'm not going to do it. Right? So that should not be. So one should not be attached to not doing one's duty. If one continues to do, in due course of time, all purification will come. So even people say that there are people who go into depression, and so for them it's recommended to. And then when they are into depression, they sleep a lot. They don't do their duties and job, and for them it's sometimes recommended, hey, come up with a schedule. Even if you don't like it, just force yourself to do, right? So at least they are not engaging in their negative thoughts and brooding over and things like that. So when it comes to duty, there is no question of liking or dislike, and so that's the training generally imparted from a very young age. But then, because the kind of work that one is engaged, it is based on that nature, and nature is developed from family samskaras from that young age. By the time they grow up, they are very firmly situated in their nature, and there is no question of dereliction of one's duties. So hope that makes sense. We'll go over the purport. So there are 3 considerations here: prescribed duties, capricious work, and inaction. So prescribed duties is duties according to one's nature. Inaction is not doing, right? Which is here. Krishna is saying, don't be attached to not doing your duty. And then capricious work is, I believe it means whimsically. Capricious means without due consideration. Let me just confirm. Yeah, see, what is it? Yeah, given to sudden, unaccountable changes or mood or behavior. I feel like doing, I'll do it. If I don't feel like doing, I won't do it, right? So that is capricious work. Whimsically, that's what it means. So this is proper prescribed duties. Inaction is not good, it's mode of ignorance, you can say. This is mode of goodness. And capricious whimsically, right? It is out of passion. And that's why, you know, that HBR article which I said, he said don't pursue your passion, because passion means I'm passionate about something, but tomorrow I might not be passionate about that, right? So that passion comes and passion goes. So if we choose a career based on our passion, then, you know, it's not sustainable, right? And one has to choose blisters. That means one is impelled to do whether one is succeeding or not succeeding. That's a kind of they're motivated by not the outcome, and they might not be even good at doing it, but they are motivated or attracted to those kind of activities. So prescribed duties are activities enjoined in terms of one's acquired modes of material nature. Very, very important, right? That's the point people miss. It's not any kind of work that you do. That work is according to one's varna, according to that acquired modes of material nature. Sometimes people say that, you know, I like math, or I like engineering, or I like an art. You know, they are attracted to different fields. And if you look at the modern education, it is structured where, you know, one is trained in a particular skill or a domain of knowledge, but that varna cultivation is missing. It's never exists. Okay, I might like engineering, but or a particular domain, but then question is, you know, I'm impelled or attracted towards it, but which aspect of it? Maybe, you know, I what suits really me is that I should be teaching that subject. It's more like Brahmana. Other could be where I know that, hey, this any kind of thing has a big social impact on people. So, you know, if maybe I'm suitable for more administrative, that means legislations or rules, which is more like Kshatriya, like, hey, just like social media. Now there is a lot of talk about uh, regulating. You know, currently it's completely unregulated. Now there are people who are motivated, they are driven by that cause. Hey, this thing needs to be regulated because they think, oh, it could affect society in a positive way or negative way, and you know, these are the shortcomings. But what is their domain? I mean, the person could be legislating so many things, but still within that particular domain. But, you know, that person is not driven to teach. That person is driven by you know, regulating and coming up with rules and regulations around it. There could be someone else who is more business minded. He's also attracted by the same domain, whatever, engineering or social media, right? Or any kind of art form for that instance. But then that person is more hey, what's the business model that I can develop? What kind of innovation I can do? Or how can I make money out of this? You see? So all three are attracted by the same domain, but you see their nature might be different. And the fourth one is, well, you know, I just want to work, which is more like Sudra, like, where, hey, you know, you pay me a salary and then I'll build something, right? So they probably are not interested or suited for teaching, or, you know, they are not so much interested. They're just attracted by the technology or the domain. They say that I don't care how much money we make for the company. I guess they're not trying to create a business empire. As long as, you know, I get a salary and I'm happy. Neither they are attracted by different regulations. They're not bothered by does this creation impact the society positively or negatively, right? So you see, people have different nature. And the thing is, most people, because in the current society that cultivation of the nature is not systematic like it was in varnashram, you know, people, they don't know what their nature is, and sometimes it takes them a lifetime. They might, at 40 years of age, they realize, you know what, I was really not suitable for working in industry. I should have done my PhD and become a professor, right? You see. So, but, you know, that's something, if the proper varna system was there, they would have known this at the age of 12. And some people do. Some people, you know, they are properly situated in that work, but there are not many actually. You know, sometimes people, it's a lifelong journey of frustration, and they don't even know what is bothering. You know, we have the good fortune of knowing what the varnashram system is and why it is in a particular, it is designed in a particular way. We are able to apply that framework. Most people don't even know why they are not satisfied. So that's why that cultivation of one's varna and then that mode is very important. So when we bring up our children, you know, as we think about their career, we should be very cautious in terms of making sure they don't repeat their mistakes, in the sense that, there's no one in this world who is not able to maintain their family. I mean, I know there are people of different, some are really poor, but at least who have some sort of stable social background, they can at least have some decent education, they will be able to maintain their family. And so, and any skill one is good in, the wealth will come. It's not that one has to be a neurosurgeon. Everyone has to be a neurosurgeon. One could be good in any other skill and still make a decent living, but that will come. But if the motivation is just money, when things are not right, a person might not be happy, first of all, right? Even if one is making money, or even if one is happy, one does not, just feels out of place, right? Is driven by passion. But when one is impelled by the nature, even if one fails, he will keep on doing it. Even if one, just like those who are really business minded, they might have so many failures. They might have this startup company, that startup company failed so many times, they don't give up. It doesn't bother them. Why? Because they are driven. They're impelled. They are very business minded. That's their nature. So it is very important to find out what the nature of the child is. And maybe if we cultivate the children, and sometimes the samskara of the parent also make a difference. That's how they acquire nature. Of course, they go to school, and there is so many other samskaras that they are subjected to. But there could be one particular nature that is predominant, and that one has to find out. The parents have to find out, and they have to nurture and cultivate that that nature, and then encourage the child to take up career that matches that nature. And that means if they are attracted to a particular art form or a skill or a technology, I'm not saying we should stop them. They can continue that, but within that there are 4 divisions in any skill or domain. What are the 4 divisions? Well, are you more suitable for teaching? Are you more suitable for administrative kind of work? Are you more suitable to run a business? Or are you more suitable to just simply work as a salaried employee? And that is very, very important to find out. And when somebody is engaged in that way, you would never be depressed in one's life, despite of the ups and downs or favorable and unfavorable circumstances. And when one is engaged according to that one's nature, that work is eligible. It's pure, it's not subject to sin, as we will learn in subsequent verse, and one can offer that as a sacrifice. Yeah, then Krishna, he's saying, well, Lord advised Arjuna not to be inactive, but that he perform his prescribed duty without being attached to the results. So we talked about that. One who is attached to the result of his work is also the cause of the action. At least one thinks like that, because if I do this, I'll be able to achieve this, right? And one might think that he's the only cause. And so when one succeeds, and he enjoys, and when he fails, one suffers. Why? Because he thinks, oh, it was all because of my mistakes that I failed. Well, you are not the only cause, right? There are 5 factors, but that so because of the imperfect understanding, one is subjected by his dualities of extreme elation or suffering. Yeah, this is a big topic, big topic. As far as prescribed duties are concerned, they can be fitted into 3 subdivisions, mainly routine work, emergency work, and desired activities. And I had written a blog article which I might have shared with you. If not, I'll share it with you again at the end of this class. Maybe I see if I can pull it up while the class is going on. But this is a topic that's not very well understood, and it causes a lot of confusion. Srila Prabhupada is just one sentence summarized the descriptions, I believe, from 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter number, it's one of the second last chapters, I believe, second or third last chapter. Let me tell you the exact point. But here he's saying, people ask, okay, you're saying prescribed duties, but what are exceptions? And those exceptions, if they are not understood, then even when we look at Srila Prabhupada's instruction, it might appear that they are contradicting each other. It says Prabhupada said to do this one time and then do something else on another occasion. Well, one of them is an exception, and that's what is Srila Prabhupada summarizing in that sentence, which is actually summary of a couple of verses from chapter 11. Yes, chapter 11 of the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in which Narada Muni is describing the Varnashram system in much more detail. What are the prescribed duties for different Varnas, what they should be doing, what they should not be doing. So in that, this particular conversation comes up. So routine work is when things are going fine, right? So one is engaged according to the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya or Sudra nature. But there are situations when there is an emergency. Emergency means, well, say there is a famine, for instance, or the things are not going on normally. That means I cannot maintain my livelihood, which is like really dire circumstances, right? I cannot put food on the table. And in that situation, one is allowed temporarily, until the things improve, temporarily allowed to take up activities of a varna, which in the social order, though there is no higher or lower, but in if from the purification perspective of samskaras, the Brahmanas have to go through more purificatory samskaras. So in that sense, if we call an order, a Brahmana can take up the activity of Vaishya, right? But he should never take up the activity of an employed. He might, Kshatriya means he doesn't go to fight or anything, but he can take up the activity of a Vaishya, right? So which is, Brahmana is not supposed to engage in trade or agriculture or like that. But when there is emergency, they can take it up. Kshatriyas, on the other hand, because they are responsible for maintaining law and order, even during those extenuating circumstances, they might still, hopefully, should be able to collect taxes. Otherwise, there is no society. The society cannot go on beyond that. But in order to maintain law and order, Kshatriyas, even during dire circumstances, they are encouraged not to take up other profession. In worst case, again, they can take up agriculture or activities like that. And again, this is temporary. When things improve, one has to resume or come back to the prescribed duties according to one's varna. Then the desired activities is the flip side of it. So one is, I'm not able to maintain my family, and so I might take up a profession which is not according to my varna, and specifically a lower varna. When higher, lower, more in terms of purificatory perspective, not distinction between the classes in the sense that the people themselves are lower. Is more about the purificatory samskaras that one has to go through. And when it comes about the flip side of that is that the varnas, they also provide important services to the society. The brahmanas, they are providing knowledge, direction, what is right, what is not right. They are providing guidance to the society, specifically the kings, how they should administer, and they voluntarily accept poverty so that there is no conflict of interest. Otherwise, if they are impelled by remuneration or from the kings, then they would be afraid of speaking the truth, and that's why Brahmana is subject to voluntarily accept poverty. The flip side, the other side is that they provide important services, like the Kshatriyas, and make sure that the society in general is peaceful. There is law and order maintained, and they are all able to perform their prescribed duties. Kshatriyas are responsible for that. The Vaishyas, they are primarily responsible for agriculture, cow protection, and they might do some trading, right? Which is secondary activity. Primary is agriculture and cow protection. The Sudras, they are engaged in labor activities. So labor is very important. Cow's milk is very important for Vaishyas. Agriculture is very important. The people, they are dependent on food grains, so they are providing important services. So the flip side is, it might be a situation where there are like a varna, members of one varna, they are not in enough numbers, or they are not present at all, and so that important services are missing, right? Say there are no Vaishyas, right? So in that case, or there are not enough Vaishyas, then Sudras can take up the task of Vaishyas. So now someone can take up an activity of a higher varna. Suppose there are no Brahmanas, or there are not enough Brahmanas. The Brahmana provide an important service to the society, which is teaching and guiding the society. Without that, society cannot function. Now, because the Brahmanas are not present, maybe a Vaishya, or rather a Kshatriya first, and if not even a Vaishya, can take up the activity of a Brahmana, which is a higher Varna, right? Temporarily, until there are, the Brahmana Varna is restored, so that these services are not stopped. So that is desired activities. And so this is a very important injunction that one has to understand. Similarly, for women, they are also trained in these samskaras, but they generally assist their husbands when they perform the activities of varnas. Like a Brahmani, she is helping her husband in performing the rituals or sacrifices, making preparation. Similarly, a Kshatrani, right? She would raise the children and will support her husband. But sometimes there is a war, all the men died, right? Women they don't go out in the war to fight, but that doesn't mean they don't have valor. They are trained in the same samskaras. They might not go to a gurukul to learn military arts, but they generally taught by their brothers or fathers, and they are skilled in using weapons. But there's no men to fight, or all men died. Then the women can take a charge, and they can they can take up the arms and they could fight. So that's an emergency work, right? So you're not directly desired activities, right? The society is dependent on the protection, and when there is no one else able to do it, right, then they should and should step up and take up the charge. And there are many examples in history. In India, the famous example is that of Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, right? And then she fought against the British. She is known for the famous slogan, "Main meri Jhansi nahi dungi." I would not give my kingdom, right? So she fought. So that's valor, right? Because there was no one to be able to take up that task. So, that. So these injunctions, so the exceptional conditions are given. And if one does not understand, there are exceptions to everything, right? And so it's very important to understand what those exceptions are. There are two kinds. The first one is associated with inability to maintain one's livelihood, in which case one can take up an activity of a lower varna. And when the desired services are not available to the society, one can take up the activities of the higher varna in order to provide those important services to the society. Both exceptions are temporary, and when situations normalize, one should come back to one's prescribed duties. When one acts according to one's prescribed duties, one is not subject to sin. Again, we'll discuss, I think I've discussed this in the past, but the actual verse will come up again, and we'll discuss that as well. I hope this makes sense. Are there any questions on that? I know the purport's still not over, but it's an important point, so I just wanted to take a pause over here. I have elaborated this in an article, and I'll make sure I share that after the class. So please remind me if I don't. Yes.
So how is this prescribed duties applicable in Kali Yuga? Because most of us are all, I think, in Varna Shankara rather than Varna Ashrama lineage.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an important point. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of our Gaudiya Acharyas, he mentions that based on the description in the scriptures, in 18th chapter, the qualities of the Varnas are described. One should find out what one's nature is. Even if we did not have that samskara training, there might be a predominant nature. And then if possible, we should take up a profession that is more suitable according to our varna. So for children, we can take, now that we know, we can try to cultivate them accordingly. Though it won't be exactly as pure as you would do it traditionally, right? Because you're still within the modern context. But the Vaishnava is one who takes the essence and applies it in the present time, place, and circumstance. But still, we have to apply that essence. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that when one finds that one's nature, and if he cannot, then he can take help from others. One is able to do it. But those qualities are described, and one has to really probe into that and then take up a profession that is suitable. Then one can be properly situated. And so that is, in Bhaktivinoda Thakur is not from an ancient time; is fairly recent, right? In the 19th century. Again, the British were ruling India at the time, and a lot of things were already kind of changing, and so varnashram system was not fully established. He himself was educated in the Western way, right? He was a son of a big zamindar. He received Western education, and the British were ruling, and so all the education was British. He was reading Dante and a lot of other different philosophers, and later. He studied Gaudiya literature in much more detail. So, of course, these are his pastimes. He is empowered, and he appeared specifically to re-establish Vaishnava culture. But yeah, that's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur's instruction is specifically for Kali Yuga. I just appeared 100 years ago. So, excuse me. So we can, take this up. I don't have a silver bullet in terms of, I don't have a mastery in terms of how to identify people's nature, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur has provided that framework, and we can use it and try to apply it as much as possible. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Yeah, so routine work is performed as an obligation in terms of scriptural injunction. Without desire for results is a mode of goodness. Work with results becomes a cause of bondage. So we talked about that. But ultimately, everyone begins there. You cannot directly jump to the mode of goodness. Initially, it has to come from passion. But in due course of time, when one is fixed in knowledge, because later Krishna says that, well, the purpose of karma is to be ultimately to gain knowledge. And when we're fixed in knowledge, he says, Jnanagni dagdaha. All the karmas are burned, the karmic reactions are burned by Jnanagni, the fire of knowledge. And what is the knowledge? Well, knowledge is that ultimately all actions, or specifically all the prescribed duties, are meant for Krishna's enjoyment, to be offered as a sacrifice. So everyone has a proprietary right in regard to the prescribed duty. Why is it a right? We talk about rights a lot, right? Especially in the US, we have right, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, right? Right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right to bear weapons, the Second Amendment, which again would create a lot of trouble as we are experiencing in the present context. But so there are different rights, right? So right is something which is logically very desirable, right? And so one might say, why is it desirable to perform duties? Because when there are rights and there are duties, right? It seems in the present context, as we understand, is like two opposite sides of the same coin. But here Srila Prabhupada is saying, well, it is right to perform the duty, right? Because its prescribed duties are purificatory, and we want to be purified, right? And so we have that right to perform our prescribed duties, so that in due course of time, we will go through the purification. But one should act without attachment, and then that would come naturally in due course of time, because of the law of diminishing returns and because of being impelled by one's nature. Such disinterested, obligatory duties doubtlessly lead one to the path of liberation. Arjuna was therefore advised by the Lord to fight as a matter of duty without attachment to the result. His non-participation in battle is another side of attachment. See, so the renunciation and attachment, is just two different manifestations of the same root cause, right? what is it? If it's something pleasing to me, I'll do it. If it's not pleasing, I won't. So that is attachment. Such attachment never leads to the path of salvation, right? It has to be obligatory. See, disinterested, obligatory duties. Like, as a Kshatriya, he has to fight. Right? You should not think, well, whether I will be able to enjoy or not enjoy, right? That's not the criteria. It is a duty to fight for a righteous cause. Any attachment, positive or negative, see, both causes a bondage. A golden chain is as much as an iron one because both of them bind. Just because if I'm bound by a golden chain doesn't make it any better. Inaction is definitely very sinful. Therefore, fighting as a matter of duty was the only auspicious path for salvation. So this is sum and substance of this verse, and we spent quite some time, but I think it's very, very important. The prescribed duties are an important point. When Srila Prabhupada, when he wrote the purports, he was at a very advanced age of his life, and he wanted to give the highest. And so in his purports, he is mentioning and and highlighting the importance of Krishna consciousness and ultimately direct service to the Supreme Lord and chanting primarily. But later on, he does mention that one he sees that many disciples are not able to be situated on their highest platform directly, and they need gradual purification. And so his desire was that varnashram systems would be established in the modern context, so that they have a good framework or foundation based on which they can make gradual spiritual progress. And so in that context, it's very important to understand what the prescribed duties are and how we could engage, because chanting can replace everything, but how much can we chant? You can chant 2 hours, maybe 3 hours a day if we have, some of us have that flexibility, but most of the time we are working. And then somebody was asking that question. I think Kashyap, we had the discussion earlier. Is he? I don't see him today. He's not here today. Okay. That the.
I'm there.
Oh, you're here. Okay. Sorry. I saw your last name first. So okay. I missed it.
That's okay.
Okay. So yeah, if you're working, then that work, it becomes like an extraneous activity which is not part of our spiritual practice. But when we are acting according to our nature, according to the prescribed duties, we're properly situated, and when that work is pure, because in due course of time we are not, the material motivation goes away, that work itself becomes eligible to be offered as a sacrifice, right? Like as Krishna is instructing Arjuna, he's not asking me to go away to the forest and meditate. He says, this is your spiritual path, it's part of it. But then you have to act according to your prescribed duties. So then our entire existence has a meaning and a purpose. And so that's why it's very important to understand the importance of varnashram, so that we can achieve the highest objective which Srila Prabhupada has focused on, remembering and serving Krishna. But it cannot be sustained or achieved easily if you don't have that strong foundation. And that's why if you look, the theme of a lot of discussion is all about prescribed duties in the entire Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna is never asking Arjuna to abandon that. Okay, so we'll take a pause. It's already 6:30. If any further questions or comments, we can take that. We covered 2 verses, but I think it was worth the time that we spend on this very, very important verse. 247. Yeah. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes.
I have another question. So while you were explaining in the translation, so you said something about jnana. So I wasn't able to quite grasp it. So will jnana alone help one in the path of liberation, or with the help of jnana he has to apply that knowledge to help him in the liberation?
This was Arjuna's question. He says to Krishna that, hey, first you ask me to do activity, do my prescribed duties. Then you're saying that, I should cultivate knowledge. Can you tell me clearly, is it knowledge or is it action? And so then Krishna later in the 4th chapter, he says, well, it's action in Krishna consciousness, action in knowledge. And so the thing is, just like I was given this example, a child does not know why he has to study. What's the purpose of study? What are the means of success in that activity? He just has to do it. But due course of time, he will understand. Right? So earlier, because he did not understand the entire scope or the purpose, he has to be materially motivated, or sometimes chastised, or at least made fearful of punishment. Both danda, or sometimes punishment, sometimes some sort of material allurement. So similarly, initially people, they are motivated materially, but in due course of time they will know what is the real purpose, why I am doing this. Then they are properly situated. They are not so much need that material allurement. But so that is knowledge. Now what happens when you get that knowledge? What do? You stop acting. Rather, if one has really acquired knowledge, one will continue to act, but that activity is now at a completely different level, because now that activity is in knowledge. Just like that child, when he knows that, well, the purpose of all this is that, well, if I have a good education, I can I have a meaning or purpose in my life, and this could also help me maintain my livelihood, and one might be able to pursue one's interests and things like that. And so one does not need any material allurement or any chastisement. And what it rather it means, so when the child gets knowledge, right, what does the child do? Does he stop acting? Well, no, rather he will continue, he will act with even more vigor and with the right intention. As that was Arjuna's question, because Arjuna was confused. I'm like, what is it? Should I act or should I gain knowledge? So he was still missing the point. Right, so now here in the 4th chapter, and so Krishna has to again explain, okay, these are not two different things. They harmonize together, and so you have to act in knowledge. And so so Jnanagni Dagdha, your karmic reactions are destroyed in the fire of knowledge. That means why is one bound? Just like that, one who is fighting on the battlefront is not self-motivated, right? He is acting on the instructions of a higher authority, and so one is not subject to karmic reactions, right? And so similarly, when one is acting not because of material allurement or because of fear of chastisement, one is acting because of that obligatory disinterested. It's an interesting word. Disinterested means it's not that one is not interested in working. One is not impelled by material allurement. That's what it literally means. It's disinterested in enjoyment or the outcome of the activity. That's not the primary motivation. It's obligatory. It's my duty, I should do. Right. So that is action in knowledge. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. So what I was a little bit confused is we have the devotional service, right? So the 8 levels of devotional service, Shravanam, Kirtanam, which is knowledge about Krishna. So I was asking in more of terms of, okay, so knowledge about Krishna, will that help? So there is knowledge about Krishna, and then there is second thing called acting on the knowledge of Krishna consciousness, like, for example, preaching and all those stuff. So do you understand what my question was, Prabhu? So knowledge about Krishna, will that help in taking the sins away? So that was my question.
Yeah, just give that example again. If you look at that example, Sravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Arshanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, right? So there are 9 processes of devotional service. So I might know the verse, I can quote it, I can tell you the meaning, but then I have to act on it, right? So if I don't do Shravanam, if I don't do Kirtanam, if I don't do Vishnu Smaranam, then that is just knowledge. It's not action in knowledge, right? So what is the purpose of knowing the verse? Again, is not to be just able to quote it. Well, you can quote it and you can help others understand. Yeah, there's maybe some value in it, but then I myself has to practice. That is a real value, right? It's for my own save yourself before you save others, right? Just like you go on an airplane, put the oxygen mask on yourself first, then you help others. So if you gain knowledge, yeah, you can share with others, but yeah, first we have to practice ourselves, and that is the real benefit. And when we share with others, we feel like we are helping others, but in reality, that's just an opportunity for us to remind ourselves again. When I'm speaking, I'm in no position to help others. If you are getting benefit, that's good. But also, it's when I'm saying, I'm also reinforcing the concepts in my psyche, and I have to remind myself that I have to practice and act on it. And so, by practicing is what going to help ultimately. The difference is that, well, one might be doing it initially what might happen, one might be practicing it, but they don't know why we are practicing, right? Then it becomes sentimental. When we don't know why we are practicing, then it doesn't have a strong foundation, and I might stop practicing tomorrow. Why? Because there is no strong foundation. And then it also means that I don't understand, well, how it is working. I don't know why I'm doing. I don't know how it is actually helping. If you don't know, then that also one might be not so motivated, because how it is working, I don't understand how exactly is chanting going to help me. Well, some people can still continue all their life, and not everyone has to understand, or not able to. But if you have that understanding, then one has a more strong foundation. This is the different phases, different stages of chanting. There is Nam Aparad, there is Nam Abhas, and there is Suddha Nam. There are different stages. Okay, I'm at this stage. I have to do this, Anartha Nivritti, then I come. So, right, see, again, that knowledge, by that knowledge, I can apply that framework and try to analyze what my situation is, where I am lacking, what I need to do to overcome those lackings, and how I can make progress. And so then again, what is it? Knowledge. So knowledge, ultimate objective of knowledge again is not, it does not lie in a vacuum. It has to apply, right? So even in that context, I hope that, does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah, I'm clear now, Prabhu. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare. Okay, we're already 6:37. Thank you for staying long. If there's more questions, I can take that question right now, or we could do offline. Either way is fine. If somebody needs to drop off while I'm answering more questions, they're also fine. All these lectures are recorded, but one last time, let me bring it up if anyone would like to discuss anything. Okay, looks like there are no more questions, so we'll conclude the class here. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. See you next week.
Thank you, Hare
Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.